Open your ears and lube up your butthole. It's time for the What Do We Call It podcast. Now, here's your host. It's Jmann. Welcome to the What Do We Call It podcast. I'm Jmann, and here's number 2 for Mental Health Awareness Month. And I gotta say, it's gonna sound like I have a lot of mommy issues and stuff, but I'm gonna make it all make sense. There's an overarching theme here, and it's basically that baby boomers were shitty parents, and they were emotionally abusive, and they were ill-equipped to take care of us, Gen Xers and elder millennials at large.
Why?
So when I was a kid, I lived in a house where my mother was authoritarian. It was her way or the highway. You did what she told you or what she asked, or else there were consequences. I frequently will tell people I knew tough love and tougher love. And at times I would complain about how stringent she was, and she'd say things like, "You want to see a bitch? I'll show you a bitch." It was always like, "Oh, you think I'm bad? I'll fucking show you how bad I can be. How dare you put me in my place?" And maybe it's her, specifically her, versus other parents of my friends and other people I've known, because there isn't another parent that I've ever met that is anything like Linda. She is like the fucking Michael Jordan of emotionally ill-equipped mothers. And I have to say that over time, I've come to believe that she either has borderline personality disorder or full-blown narcissistic personality disorder, which I know the word narcissism gets thrown around a lot these days, mainly by people that don't know how to properly fucking use it or go through the checklist of symptoms. But let me tell you that she can't handle constructive criticism, and if you tell her she's done something wrong, she will fucking attack you. She has an overinflated sense of self. She needs to be admired or told she's great. Those are 3 very big ones for NPD. But I digress. The house I grew up in was very chaotic. I mean, my dad worked, he provided, she was at home, took care of my sister, got me off to school, took care of the house. I got home, she gave me a snack, made sure I did my homework. My dad got home, he took care of my sister, he fed her dinner, he made us dinner. Rarely did she fucking cook, unless he was side jobbing and staying out late to make more money for various things that they or we needed. And I just remember spending so many nights where she was at her wit's end and she couldn't fucking handle the fact that she had me for a son and that I would get into trouble. Maybe she would have been better with a daughter instead of me. I don't know. But she did have one daughter, and that daughter was severely mentally retarded when born in 1971. That was the term they used. I don't want to sit here and argue the semantics of language about developmental disabilities or this, that, or whatever the fuck you want to call people to make them feel nice about themselves. Anyways, she always cared for my sister the way that you would care for a baby, because my sister was developmentally a 3-month-old, plus wheelchair-bound, totally blind, partially deaf. So my mom, when she was becoming a parent for the first however many years that she didn't have me yet, she only had one child that required constant care, and it was difficult, and they never got any better, and they never developed any further. So she was always stuck caring for, basically, an infant. So she never had to deal with growing pains or learning how to handle emotional mood swings or bullying at school. For instance, this classic mantra of my mother, when people would bully me at school and talk shit and tease me, she'd say, "Well, they're just jealous." Well, what do you mean? They're just jealous. They're jealous. Jealous of what? Well, they're just jealous. Hallmark of fucking boomer parenting is you have an opinion, but you don't know enough about it to sit there and back it up with supportive facts and statements with examples and such. This is what I believe. This is what I'm telling you. Fucking take it for gospel. And it's just like, I went to school once and said, "You guys are just making fun of me because you're jealous." They're like, "Of what, loser?" And I was like, "Oh, shit. That was terrible advice. They're not jealous. They're just assholes." I had to learn that one on my own. Because what would they be jealous of? That I dress goofy? That I was eccentric? That I was a bookworm, but also kind of emotionally immature? Or that perhaps they wish that they had retarded sisters and were constantly fucking under the microscope? Because I got to tell you, hearkening back to my previous episode where I talked about nobody cares about men's feelings, my mom didn't care about my feelings at fucking all. When it came to my sister, I'd be like, "Just once, can we go somewhere without her? Oh, we're having a pizza party at the end of basketball season. Can we not bring her?" And she's like, I'm not hiding your sister. I'm not going to be ashamed of her. Well, here's the thing. Linda, who never knew anything about therapy or mental health and whose own mother she swore was schizophrenic but didn't really know anything about psychology other than to point some fingers and call somebody else crazy, deflecting, projecting, what have you. It's not so much about wanting to hide her as much as just once I would have liked to have felt like a normal kid that didn't have that life, that I could have been like everybody else on my team or my classmates, that didn't have a sibling with mental disabilities and their family life was structured differently because of it. That would have been nice. And maybe, as you were raising me, you would have thought, oh, I'm learning. I can do better. I did this and it upset him. Maybe I should try something else. She didn't think like that. She was the be-all, end-all, know-it-all of parenting. And to this day, she still thinks that she knows better than I do, even though she's basically a fucking shut-in. She's 4'10", 300 pounds, 75 years old, barely can fucking move. I mean, her ambulation is garbage, and she waddles when she walks, and it always looks like a fucking struggle. How her heart hasn't exploded yet, I don't know, but I'm not just trying to make fun of her physical deficiencies and such. The point here is that her time has passed, and she is long beyond trying to learn anything new. That's an old dog that knows no tricks other than to just drop the hammer. As evidenced by the fact that even though she had all these years to adjust to me having kids and have less pressure on her so she could be kinder to my kids, she just isn't. She's just a battering ram. She tells them things like, well, if you don't have God in your life, you have problems. Or, well, you think that you might be a lesbian, but I think it's just a phase. How about shut the fuck up and let her figure out who she is? Because if you taught me anything on how to parent, you taught me how not to parent. Instead of, you have to believe what I believe and you have to be just what I am. No. I let my kids figure that shit out for themselves. I tell them what I believe and how I got there. I walk them from the whole fucking point A to point Z of how I formulated my opinions, my beliefs, and the credos that I live by. And then I give them the agency to figure it out on their own and formulate their own opinions that don't have to align with mine specifically. Now, if they say some really goofy fucking new age left-wing uber woke bullshit, I will tell them, hey, you sound fucking insane. You should probably walk it back towards the middle some. But other than that, I don't tell them, well, you believe is stupid and, that'll never work. Because that's what I received as a kid. A woman that would shit on my dreams. And you may be asking yourself at this 7 minutes and 37 second point, why is he only talking about his mom? What about his dad? Because my dad went to work after waking up, getting my sister ready, giving her breakfast, putting her in her chair, and then packing his lunch and hitting the fucking road, work all goddamn day, come home, say hi to me, start dinner, feed my sister while it's cooking, fucking serve dinner, give her a bath, put her to bed, and then basically fall asleep on the fucking floor from exhaustion because all he did was work, work, and work. He didn't have a lot of time for hobbies. He didn't have a lot of friends, honestly. He never had anybody come over to fucking hang out, I can tell you that much. And he came from a big family, but none of my uncles were coming to hang out and say hi because they lived far away. My dad basically his entire life was the family and providing for the family. So I'm not going to talk shit about him because he was too busy trying to keep us all afloat that he didn't have any energy left to fight Cuntzilla on her constant war against everybody else's psyche. So if you read about it, you'll see that baby boomers didn't really believe in mental health issues being discussed because their parents never did, so they didn't learn that. And therapy wasn't very big for them until basically the 80s because nobody pointed in that direction. You didn't talk about your problems. You didn't show any weakness or vulnerability because that's just not who Americans were. We were tried and true. We were tough. We were hardened. We could fucking do anything until we all broke and we all had issues and we all needed to be fucking figured out what was really going on with us. And it's funny, I was reading about some shit before I started doing this episode, and it stated that PTSD was not even in the DSM until the 1980s. And even then, it wasn't until like 10 years later that somebody went, oh, trauma from parenting abuse and living a hard life and not being given enough love. That's why all these parents are screwed up. But, oh, I suppose kids could have that too from being raised in hard houses. So it's like this domino effect where the greatest generation were shitty, cold-hearted parents turned the boomers into slightly less shitty, cold-hearted parents who eventually, when they had kids that were Gen Xers that had issues but were latchkey kids because the divorce rate spiked, that everyone's like, oh, maybe we should do something about it.
You don't say.
Getting back to the matter at hand here is that all of these parents were basically helicopter parents. They had to make sure that they had their finger on everything you were doing. But at the same time, we also remember that we would go outside in the morning and play till lunch, and then eat and go back outside and play outside until dinner, and then maybe go back outside until the lights came on the street lamps, or maybe just play until dark and then go inside and wash up and go to bed. So, as hard as they were on us, they also let us go do our own thing because, frankly, they didn't want to fucking deal with us because they didn't know how to fucking deal with us. Connecting dots. So my mother, I have said, has a myriad of mental health issues that are untreated because she won't admit that there's anything wrong, and if you insinuate that there is, she flips way the fuck out. I mean, I can't even tell you how many times I tried to tell her about stuff when I was in community college between the years of August 2000 and June of 2003. And she'd sit there and I'd bring up stuff from my classes. And she's like, save your psychobabble for your friends. I don't believe in that. Don't try to diagnose me. Because yes, why would we sit there and self-examine so we could be a better human being, Linda? That's fucking stupid, right? Well, she didn't do any of that, so she didn't learn. And she never got used to having me as I aged, and she never thought of me as a teen, or as an adult, or as a father. She still treats me like I'm a kid. Until about a year and a half ago, when we were having an argument, and she said, well, you're not going to tell me what to think and do. I'm the parent. And I went, excuse me? What the fuck did you just say? She's like, well, and she froze. And I'm like, I am a 40-year-old grown fucking man, Linda. I'm not your little boy anymore. But maybe that's the problem, is you only had one kid that was always a baby, and you never learned how to raise me as I aged and progressed and matured emotionally. And the fact that you're saying I'm the parent tells me that your life is sad and pathetic, and you have no idea how to handle the fact that I'm an adult, and I don't fucking need you. You could drop dead tomorrow, and nothing about my life changes. In fact, it would only increase in quality exponentially every day, week, month, and year thereafter that I didn't have to fucking deal with you anymore. So if you want to be like, I'm the parent, I'm laughing at your ass, because that means that you have nothing to live for except for this title that you're holding on to, that the actual application of that role no longer is anything that is involved in my life. You're a grandmother at best when I let you be. And she fucking lost her shit. And that's when I knew I got to her, that I chipped away at some of that facade. Because then she starts talking about things we weren't even fighting over. Saying, don't you tell me I can't donate to your high school in your name because you disagree with them. I'm like, we weren't even talking about that. But that's funny that you bring that up instead of just dealing with the issue that I just parsed you into several pieces. Girls, let's go. Because my daughters were there after school and they were eating, and when they finished, we bounced, and I fucking rang my hands over my head like a champion that I got into her head. Which then brings me to my daughters, who are almost 14 and 11. And they've both had issues because their life sucks, because frankly, I made babies with a completely emotionally maladapted child of a human being, because I had low self-esteem, because I grew up in a house with tough love, and nobody ever taught me to hold myself to a higher standard and actually care about who I was and who I was with. So I lowered my standards. I got with somebody that wasn't worth it. I stuck my dick in crazy, and I've been paying for it ever since. And I got to tell you that these kids, they are depressed. They are anxious. One is Gen Z. The other is on the cusp of Gen A. Basically, they're both Gen A in terms of emotional maturity and mental growth. I mean, their life fell apart 4 years ago almost exactly when their mom got them taken away by CPS for meth. I mean, she'll say, they never took my kids. I let you have them. And she did. She brought them over and said, I can't parent them right now because I'm an addict and I need to fix myself. But that was about 3 days before they were about to have them snatched from her by CPS. So honestly, you got me only on a technicality there.
God damn it!
Both of these kids have had issues with sharing their feelings with me, and maybe that's on me. I've tried to foster an environment where I tell them, if you have a problem, you come to me. Don't worry that you're going to be in trouble. Don't worry that I'm going to get mad at you. I just want to know that you're okay. And I've told them, if you have anything you want to talk about, please come to me. I've been through some shit. But I don't drink and I don't drug and I'm not a fucking crazy ass like your mom. I might have some issues with controlling my anger when I get overstimulated or too stressed out, but that's because your mom's a nutcase and your grandmother is like on a whole nother fucking level. They've each taken their turns posting things on social media that they shouldn't have instead of talking to me. And then classmates saw this shit and were concerned and turned it into school admin, who then called me after they pulled them into their social workers' offices and said, "We have a problem. We need to discuss it. Your child seems to have issues." And both my kids have been to therapy and then quit therapy. Neither one of them wants medication, but their therapist, former, said they could probably benefit from it. They just don't want to do it. But here's where I'm really getting at with this, is that most recently, my youngest daughter, she's 11, expressed that she has frequent thoughts of suicidal ideation and that everybody would be better off if she wasn't around. And when I found that out, it broke my fucking heart. And I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of it, but it was a shit show. And she was at the hospital for 5 hours and was evaluated and found to not really be a threat to herself because she wasn't planning anything and didn't necessarily have the means or the desire to hurt herself. But it was more attention-seeking. The point here is that this weekend they're going up to the cabin with my parents. And she is like deathly afraid that my mom is going to find out and judge her and fucking scold her and lecture her about this shit. And I got to tell you, in January of 98, I tried to kill myself by taking sleeping pills. Obviously, it didn't work because I'm still here. That is my one and only suicide attempt, and really what it was a cry for help. If I'm looking back and being honest with myself, I didn't technically want to die. But I've stated over the period of years and many episodes that after 26 years of clinically diagnosed deep depression, I've also admitted that I have had 26 years of up and down suicidal ideation. And some of it's real because my life sucks and I don't know how I'm going to keep going because my tank's on empty, but I got to keep being there for these kids. And a lot of it is intrusive thoughts because when we feel like everything's hopeless and we have no control, it's easy to give up because that's the simplest thing you can do. The point here, though, is my daughters. For the whole episode is my daughters. As much as I bitched about boomers not being good parents, it's getting to my daughters. And that they don't tell me these things that they feel because they're afraid I'm going to be mad at them for thinking it, or that they're going to think I'm going to see them differently and treat them differently, and they don't want that. And I told them both that wouldn't be the case. If you're sad, tell me. If something's bothering you, tell me. When you have problems at school, I fucking go to bat for you and I make sure shit gets fixed. When you have a problem at your mom's, I make sure that I step in the middle and stop her from being an emotional battering ram and steamrolling you. So have some faith in me. And that's something my mom never gave me, was that feeling that I could be secure in confiding in her my feelings. Because if I said things, she'd mock it. She'd tell me I had no control. She'd tell me that I didn't have any base of reference or that it was silly that I felt that way and that I needed to buck up. I mean, hell, when I tried to kill myself, she couldn't even say the word suicide. All she would sit there and do was say, "Oh, you tried to check out early. That's the most selfish thing you could do." That was her baby boomer parenting take on suicide, as it was the most selfish thing you could do. Instead of me the other night talking to my daughter saying, "I'm not trying to make you feel guilty when I say all this, but listen to me clearly here, little girl. I love you, and I want you to think about if you killed yourself and you weren't around anymore. I want you to think about how your mom and I would feel. Then I want you to think about how your stepmother would feel. Then I want you to think about how your oldest sibling would feel. Then I want you to think about your 3 half-siblings that are 7, almost 7, and 4.5 respectively. Then I want you to think about your stepsister. Then I want you to think about your friends. Then I want you to think about your teachers and your classmates. How would all of those people feel if you died?" And she didn't say anything. And I said, "I don't want you to give me an answer. I just want you to think to yourself." Because the answer is we'd all be devastated. Our hearts would be broken. Life would never be the same or probably good ever again for many of us. And that's not because we would be so mad at you. It would be because we'd be heartbroken because we love you so much and we wouldn't have you anymore. And you need to think about next time that you feel worthless and be better off dead, that that's not the case. Because I would never be able to be comfortable in this bedroom again without you because of the memories, or this house, the living room, the driveway, the yard, the swing set, the cabin, the pool, the beach, bike riding, various parks we go to, would never be the same for me because they all have memories attached to you that we have made there that are positive and make me feel love and make me think fondly of you And I think that you're bright and you're caring and you're fun. And I always try to make sure that we laugh a lot at this house because our lives are stressful and laughter's the best medicine. So I try to be goofy and I try to make you feel happy and I try to brighten all your bad days. And if you weren't here, I don't know how I would carry on because a part of my heart would be dead with you. Because you are part of my heart. All 4 of my children are my heart. Family is what's most important to me. And I said, you think about that the next time you have these thoughts and you tell yourself that you're not ugly or fat or stupid or worthless or that we'd be better off without you. Because fuck anybody that makes you feel that way, including myself if I ever do. Because I love you more than anything and you need to be strong. And that was sage advice. It was straight from the heart, and it changed her mood the next few days. And whether or not it lasts long or it just temporarily gives her a boost, I know that I went deep into myself, utilized my own experience, and went with the totality of the circumstances to give her the best advice to make her feel good as a father to my daughter, which is something my mother never did to me as a son. So I learned from these emotionally retarded boomers that don't know how to just back off and let us live and stop scolding us and realize they don't have all the answers and they have more days behind them than in front. So it's really time to cultivate all that shittiness and throw it away and try to be better. At the end here, try and save some of it. Try to be there for your children, baby boomers. Try to support us instead of thinking that you know best and we're weak and we're never going to get it. Because frankly, you guys fucked us up a lot and you fucked the world up a lot. And apparently emotional abuse was your brand. And it's time to fucking stop denying it and trying to gaslight us by saying, oh, you make things up or that didn't happen like Linda does to me. Because it did fucking happen. It happened a lot. It happened and it taught me terrible things about myself and it made me a shitty partner to my wife. Because it took me years to realize that I grew up in a house where my parents were fighting in front of me, and my mom was always screaming at my dad. Well, until my wife said, my parents never fought in front of me. Yours did, right? And that's why you feel comfortable fighting in front of our kids, and I don't, because that's wrong. And I had to sit there and say, oh my God, she's right. See, all these lessons we learn from our parents to try to make ourselves be better parents on our own now, we have to really hone in on that and hold tight to it, because that's what's going to define young Gen X and early millennial parents, as we like to call the Zennials. That's what's going to define us for our kids when they become parents, is how did we handle things? And I'm not one of these, you get a timeout instead of a spanking types until I needed to stop putting my hands on them because it wasn't working anymore or I felt like they didn't deserve it. And I'm not going to let you have participation trophies, but I'm going to congratulate you on the things you do right, and I'm going to try to coach you on the things you do wrong. And although my mom was authoritarian, I'm authoritative. I know the difference is important, and that being that I have rules and expectations. You either meet them or you don't. And if you fail, I'll help pick you up. And if you break a rule or you do something wrong, I will talk to you and try to teach you better so that you can be better yourself without me holding your fucking hand. Because when you leave the nest, it's a big scary world, and I want you to be prepared. That's something I never learned from my own mom. So goes the adage of the boomer parent. Well, we did the best we could. No, you did whatever you could with what you knew at the time, and now you don't want to learn to be better. So now your time has passed. So you didn't do your best. Because if that was your best, it was fucking garbage. She never gave me the tools. I had to learn on my own because nobody prepped me before I was an adult, and especially not before I was a dad. But now I'd like to think that I'm doing pretty fucking good looking in the rearview mirror at how they made mistakes and how I'm not going to repeat them. And I'm going to raise kids that are going to be better and more equipped to handle life once they're out of my home. Interact with the show on Twitter at What Do We Call It? That is at What Do We Call It? You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/group/What Do We Call It podcast show. For the What Do We Call It podcast, I'm Jmann. And that's the end.